Friends, the hour is late. I have a confession on my mind. It's a private thought. I'm in a public place. It's a confession that goes against everything that I want to believe about the world. The story I tell myself is usually an optimistic one. And it's a confession that I imagine some of you may not trust. Religion is failing our country. I say this as a religious leader. I'm partly to blame. 3 weeks ago, the president of these great United States had dinner with a group of religious leaders. He said that if the other party takes control of Congress, they will overturn everything that we've done. That much I can accept. He went on to say, they'll do it quickly and violently. And he repeated the words, and violently. There's violence. When you look at Antifa and you look at some of these groups, these are violent people, he said. I think we can all recognize that if the president of either party accuses the other in a blanket statement of fomenting violence, that's terrible. But when the pastors and priests and reverends present nod their heads in silent agreement, then religion is failing America. Last week, I spoke about how we each balance the freedom of our selfhood with the obligation to the other, and about how the dominant American culture does this with a system of contracts that ultimately, at this moment in time, breed cynicism and mistrust. On Rosh Hashanah, I argued that we can augment contracts with covenants that rebuild hope and trust. I described how we can begin right here at NVHC building those covenants. Well, the name of this country in Hebrew can teach us a lesson. Israelis call this place Artzot Habrit, the lands of the covenant. And right now, the American covenant is on life support, and religion ought to be doing CPR, and we're not. The prayer that began tonight's service, Kol Nidre, illustrates what ails our country, why religion is failing America, and how our faith leaders and institutions ought to be responding. First, at its essence, Kol Nidre is an admission of our failure to keep promises and a plea to have those promises canceled. Promises are the currency of covenant. They usually reflect our most personal and private convictions. And yet here we are in public declaring, I have failed. That is the bedrock of Yom Kippur. A willingness to admit sin, error, mistake, transgression, failure. A willingness that uncovers our deepest and most private beliefs, and yet we make that statement in public. Well, the one promise we all make in public, perhaps one of the most important promises we make. At this moment, in 5779, that promise has been broken. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This is a promise, a private feeling of loyalty and love, and a public connection to country. But two opposing camps claim ownership of these words, indivisible, liberty and justice. A piece of our private selfhood is split and bleeding because our public life is shattered and smashed. Our entire country should be with us here tonight, saying the words Kol Nidre, asking for forgiveness, promising to renew our commitments. But America is not here, because only in private groups of family and friends do we discuss our beliefs about our country. Or we shout them in the streets, in public, at protests and marches. And the distance between this private space and this public space leaves no room for us to explore the meaning of these words and to come to consensus about their definition. That is America's first ailment, a broken promise suspended between our private selves and our public communities. Second, Kol Nidre does not make any sense without understanding its underlying narrative. Narrative is a popular word scholars use to describe a worldview or a story that defines things. Neil Postman, one of my favorite scholars, writes, "I mean by narrative a story, but not any kind of story. I refer to big stories, stories that are sufficiently profound and complex to offer explanations about the origins and future of a people. Stories that construct ideals, prescribe rules of conduct, specify sources of authority, and in doing all of this, provide a sense of continuity and purpose." Kol Nidre rests on a narrative that provides that purpose. That narrative is that the laws of Torah see unfulfilled promises as an affront to God, a taking of God's name in vain each time we fail to fulfill a promise, a catastrophic risk to the survival of the community. That's the narrative of Kol Nidre. But we are Reformed Jews here in 2018. I doubt any of us truly believe that the fate of the world rests on each one of our promises in the way the Torah describes. Yet we say the words anyway. Well, America depends on narrative also. Never before in human history has an entire nation been formed around simply ideas, around a narrative, not ethnic or cultural affiliation. But like Kol Nidre, the American narrative has conflicts buried within it. The American experiment is both a city on a hill and a colonialist oppressor. America provides equality to all, but also enslaves some. America rewards merit, but tilts the scales towards the wealthy and powerful. America offers a door of refuge, but first for Christian Western Europeans. And in this moment, following the election of our country's first black president, living with the disruptive and exploitative effect of technology, feeling the destabilizing power of the global economy, America's second ailment is that our narratives have exploded in outright hostility. Like never before in our lifetimes, we can fear that the American experiment hangs precariously. And Kol Nidre illustrates America's third ailment as well. It begins in the year 1240. That was when the Catholic Church created something called the Disputation of Paris to prove its intellectual superiority to Judaism. During the proceedings, the Catholic advocate, a man named Nicholas Donin, argued that because Kol Nidre can erase our promises with a simple public statement, Jews in general cannot be trusted. Over the generations, that accusation has metastasized until Jews were blamed for everything from the Black Plague to the Treaty of Versailles, from the death of Christian children to the fabrication of 9/11. Psychologist Jonathan Haidt explains that these conspiracy theories are part of something called naive realism, the belief that I see the world as it really is, and if you do not agree, then you are either misinformed or horribly biased. The more disorienting the world becomes, the more I grasp at my view of reality, and the more I see corrupt intent in anyone who disagrees. As early modern ideas of science and philosophy shook the medieval Catholic Church, they clung to their reality, and the existence of Jews could only be explained by a nefarious plot. As our world becomes more disorienting today, we see these conspiracies all around us in our politics. Any disagreement in policy must mean that you are watching Sean Hannity or listening to NPR. They must mean you're reading too many tweets from the president or reading the New York Times. Right now, I can bet that huge swaths, 20, 30, 40% of our country, believe that foreign entities colluded with our recently elected presidents to subvert our democracy. But I can't tell you which ones believe it was Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, or George Soros and Barack Obama. This is America's third ailment. We are naive realists, trusting only those who see the world as we do, seeing mendacity, bias, and conspiracy in those who disagree. These three ailments, the private-public split, colliding narratives, and the assumption of bias, these things are tearing our country and our families apart. And religion is failing to heal us. The division between private and public happens because in private we work out our morality, and in public we work out our politics. And that might be hard to hear, because politics has become a dirty word. But we need politics. The military strategist Karl von Clausewitz famously said, "War is the continuation of politics by other means," which also means that politics is the prevention of war by other means. Politics is how we disagree without killing each other. And behind every political issue is a moral question. Behind gun control are self-protection and the sanctity of life. Behind taxes are individual achievement and social responsibility. Behind criminal justice are the legacy of racial injustice and the need for public safety. But politics demands confrontation, and morality requires vulnerability. Therefore, the only way to safely figure out our moral beliefs and political opinions outside of the echo chamber of intimate family and friends, and without the implications of making public policy for millions, the only way to do that is to find some space in between the private and the public, a hybrid space. The problem is those spaces do not exist in 2018. Journalist Mark Dunkelman wrote the book The Vanishing Neighbor, and he describes the way that clubs and leagues and neighborhoods are dying out. He describes how even classrooms avoid controversy with trigger warnings. So our families have to bear the weight of the political and become tense battlegrounds for things that should be done in public. And our public spaces, like Congress, try to resolve morality that really belongs in our intimate spaces. We need something in the middle. And so we're broken. I'd like to ask you if you could raise your hand if someone in your family sends you emails that you dread. If you fear going to Thanksgiving dinner because of the people who might be there and the opinions they might have. Seriously, raise your hands. Did anybody here experience this other than me? Religion is failing America because our faith institutions are contributing to the problem. Our churches and synagogues and mosques feel forced to choose between private and public. They become public and often will self-sort into homogeneous policy shops, or be private and forbid all politics, sticking their heads in the spiritual sand, claiming to be a spiritual haven from the outside world. Both paths fail America. Religion should instead provide the hybrid space. We did that here last March after the Parkland shooting. Some of you were here for it, our community conversation on gun violence. 2 of our members had the courage to sit on this bima right here and share stories, personal stories, about their positions on issues related to gun violence. One describing having to use a gun to protect herself and her neighbor. The other describing how violence took a dear member of the family. And then we sat in silence. And we had a deep and respectful conversation in our sanctuary, on our bima, with clergy present, including multiple generations of the community, with moments of silence, with the expectation that every speaker afterward would pause, and we would respond with one voice, saying the word, Shamati, I hear you. These are religious tools used to create a hybrid space. Following this experience, a committee of NVHC members got together and drafted a potential covenant we can use to have future conversations like this, based on guidance from a group called Better Angels, a document that will help us bridge the public-private divide. Religion also fails America when it comes to the battle of narratives, because the religions that are thriving in America, the denominations that are bursting at the seams, are the most fundamentalist and literalist. Faith leaders are training people to expect simple narratives and straightforward answers. But religion should be about living in paradox, training people to hold conflicting ideas in their minds without their heads exploding. From the Talmud to Vatican II to the Hadith literature of Islam, religion has taught the world how to wrestle with text, how to disagree and address conflicting narratives. And we do this through conversation and learning and study that reveals how to look beneath the simple narratives and find deeper meaning even when we disagree. I want us to show America that we can apply those skills to our great national texts. In a country where civics education is nothing short of anemic, religion can help us seek meaning beneath the words of the Gettysburg Address or the New Colossus or the I Have a Dream speech or Federalist 10. Through habit of study, where disagreement and dissent are encouraged, where questions dominate more than answers, religion can rebuild our ability to hold conflicting narratives. And that's how religion should be saving America. And lastly, religion, of all things, should be the antidote to conspiracies. Because a conspiracy theory is an attempt to disqualify, to delegitimize, and ultimately, I fear, to dehumanize our opponents. Religion is the reminder that all people are created in the image of God. All voices are worthy of respect. So when those evangelical Christian leaders that I described at that dinner meeting with the president bobbed their heads in silence, they betrayed the deepest teaching of their own faith, that all people are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those rights our democracy is built upon, are created in our faith traditions. And not any one policy or Supreme Court pick is worth trading those things in. Religion has the power to work against conspiracy thinking by bringing people together to encounter the other across lines of difference. That is why our work that we do with Voice and with Adams and with our church partners is so critical at this moment in time. Last October, we put this ethic into action as the interfaith leaders in Voice insisted that our fall event, an event with 1,565 people, that event would include both candidates for government or neither. It was all or nothing. And when both showed up, they were shocked to see it was the largest nonpartisan event in the entire campaign cycle. And then we followed that by creating the largest nonpartisan army of Get Out the Vote volunteers in the Commonwealth. Some volunteers came to work with Voice, having just finished working for one of the parties, literally changing out of a blue or red t-shirt into a purple t-shirt. And then we stood in doorways with a partner from a different faith, and the citizens responded. Universally, people reported that the nonpartisan work received double or triple the number of voter commitments than the work for either party. And most of the people committing to vote were first-time voters. That's what religion does. It brings people to meet people and to build trust and look past the colors and conspiracies. Religion has the power to heal America. Religion can bridge the public-private divide. It can help us wrestle with our conflicting narratives. It can create space for humanity and not conspiracy. But right now, religion is failing America, and I would like NVHC to change the role of religion in America. That is not an overstatement. I'm invited to a conference in 2 weeks where I'm asked to speak on a panel in front of a group of national donors, funders, and leaders about what we're doing right here at NVHC. We have the power to demonstrate to other religious leaders and institutions the potential to heal our country using religious tools, working with Voice or Better Angels or some of the exploratory interfaith work that a small group has done with something called the Harwood Institute. NVHC can reveal what religion ought to be doing. And that is why in the coming year, we will host more of those congregational conversations. We will bring some of the great texts of America periodically to our Shabbat sustenance conversations on Saturday mornings, and we will again join with Voice to get out the vote. I want to underscore this last point because I know many of us might live in a district we think is safe. In the last election, control of the state House of Delegates in the Commonwealth of Virginia was determined, if you remember, by the flip of a coin. It happened because of one single ballot was illegible. One ballot. Even if we live in a district that seems not to matter, high voter turnout says to candidates from all sides that we are paying attention and that no small fringe group can come along in the next election and primary a moderate with more extreme views. It says that we value democracy above party. So go vote and ask every friend and neighbor and parent and child to go vote. I want NVHC to be a 100% voting congregation. And then look in your email and sign up to help us get out the vote. And look again and find those community conversations and those opportunities to study the great texts of America. Reform Judaism echoes with the voice of the prophets. Micah rails against judges who take bribes. Jeremiah erupts at the sight of innocent blood. Since the founding of America, religion has led some of the most important movements with good ideas like abolition and civil rights and terrible ideas like temperance. We'll take the blame for that one. NVHC Change, our social action committee, helps us continue that great leadership, doing the work of service and tzedakah and, yes, advocacy on the issues we care about. But Judaism is also the tradition of Hillel and Shammai, the protectors of the minority and the preservers of dissent. So more important than any single issue our social action committee takes up, more important than any of that is the process we use to deliberate. And I am so proud to watch the endless email chains and participate in the endless conversations going back and forth to be sure we include all points in our deliberation, all points of view. Sometimes it's frustrating, but it's worth it. And this is because more important than any issue right now is the fundamental survival of American democracy. Our country is desperate for a counterforce to rebuild trust, discourse, respect, and tolerance. And I'm talking about something more than being civil. Everyone talks about being civil. I want us to be brave. I want us to wrestle with deep and difficult questions and come together to find a vision of what America could be. Who else in the world is going to do it other than religion? Yom Kippur is an acknowledgement that I am human, that I make mistakes, and I can forgive you for your mistakes. Isn't that the essence of what democracy means? My tolerance for your right to believe what I think is wrong? So in the spirit of Yom Kippur, I want to offer an apology right now. I have tried my hardest to make this sermon as nonpartisan as possible. And I'm confident that some of you will feel that I have failed. I am sure some of you will think that I am biased, perhaps even part of a conspiracy. And so I say to you, if you're still listening at this point in the sermon, here or at home, I say you're probably right. I am biased. Politically, I'm left of center, as my opening story about the president illustrates. I see more of this anti-democratic behavior coming from the right than the left. That's what I see. But I believe the underlying problem exists on both sides of the aisle. And that problem has been forming and germinating for decades and generations. Those problems are bigger than even politics, than even this administration. This administration is a symptom, not the disease. And what I have attempted to communicate is that we need religion as medicine to help us rebuild the underlying habits, beliefs, and norms that make democracy thrive. Neither party owns responsibility for that. We do. As Jews, especially, we cannot give up on America. We have been victims of conspiracy theories for hundreds of years. We know their sting like nobody else. And this country has been better to us than any place in human history not named Israel. When President Eisenhower returned from Europe after witnessing the devastation of the Holocaust, after seeing firsthand what fascism can do, after looking at the horrific evil of Stalinist communism squarely in the eye, he came home and he pushed America to go to church. From 1949 through 1960, church membership exploded by 41%. Eisenhower, a general who had command of tanks and aircraft, called religious practice spiritual weapons which forever will be our country's most powerful resource in peace or in war. We are the inheritors of those weapons. So this year, as we ask forgiveness of our sins, as we acknowledge our broken pledge, we commit ourselves to restoring those pledges in the year to come. Religion is failing America, and we have the power to save it. Gamar Chatima Tova. May we all be sealed for a good year in the book of life.